Picture two commanders in the most unforgiving theater of World War II. On one side, you have a man who led from the front, often cut off from his own radio communications, ignoring direct orders from Hitler to seize fleeting opportunities. He was a gambler, dependent on speed, shock, and intuition. On the other side, a man who sat miles behind the lines in a mobile caravan, surrounded by meticulous charts. He refused to move an inch until he had a guaranteed mathematical advantage of 3-1. He was cautious, methodical, and absolutely rigid. They never met in person during the war, yet they were obsessed with one another. They read each other's books, studied each other's habits, and defined the mid-war period. Today, we are diving into the ultimate duel of World War II, the Desert Fox versus the Spartan General. Why was Field Marshal Erwin Rommel the only commander who could truly rival Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery? Let's find out. World War II produced incredible military minds: Patton, Zhukov, Manstein. But few rivalries captured the world's imagination at the time and history's imagination since, like Erwin Rommel and Bernard Montgomery. The North African campaign, fought between 1940 and 1943, was unique. It was, as Rommel himself described it, tactics on a dissecting table. The desert was a vast, featureless ocean of sand and rock. There were few cities to hide in, no dense forests to ambush from. It was the closest thing to pure, naval-style warfare on land. In this arena, generalship mattered more than perhaps anywhere else, and for the first half of the campaign, Rommel was running circles around the British. He was so effective that British Commander-in-Chief Claude Auchinleck actually had to issue an order telling his officers to stop talking about Rommel as a supernatural bogeyman because it was destroying troop morale. Enter Bernard Montgomery in August 1942. He took over a demoralized British Eighth Army and turned it into a machine designed to do exactly one thing: crush Rommel. This rivalry wasn't just about who won or lost battles. It was a clash of two diametrically opposed military philosophies. To understand why Rommel was Monty's ultimate rival, we have to understand the impossible challenge of the Desert War. The central challenge of the North African campaign can be summed up in one word: logistics. The desert is huge. You could flank your enemy almost endlessly to the south, but you couldn't survive there. Both armies were tethered to the thin coastal road, the Via Balbia, to get fuel, water, and ammunition from their ports. The paradox of the Desert War was this: the faster you advanced, the weaker you got, because your supply lines stretched thin. The faster you retreated, the stronger you got, falling back on your own supplies. This created a seesaw effect, where armies would dash across Libya and Egypt, run out of gas, and get pushed all the way back. Before Montgomery arrived, British commanders tried to beat Rommel at his own game: mobile, swirling tank battles in the open desert, and Rommel ate them alive. Rommel's Afrika Corps was usually outnumbered and always undersupplied compared to the British. Yet time and again, he used the harsh environment and his own sheer audacity to shatter British formations. By the summer of 1942, Rommel had pushed the British all the way back to El Alamein in Egypt. The Suez Canal, the lifeline of the British Empire, was in danger. The British Eighth Army was broken, psychologically. They believed the Desert Fox was invincible. The challenge for Montgomery wasn't just beating the Germans, it was exorcising the ghost of Rommel from the minds of his own soldiers. He needed a completely new approach to neutralize Rommel's unique genius. So, how did these two rivals operate? Their leadership styles were practically mirror images. First, Erwin Rommel. He was a master of Bewegungskrieg, maneuver warfare. Rommel believed the commander's place was at the Schwerpunkt, the critical point of attack. He didn't rely on delayed reports at headquarters. He wanted to see the dust cloud with his own eyes. His greatest strength was his OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. He could cycle through this faster than any British commander before Monty. He'd see a gap in the line and throw everything into it instantly, often without telling his superiors. He used speed as a weapon to shock the enemy into paralysis. He was brilliant, but chaotic. Then you have Bernard Montgomery. Monty was the antidote to chaos. If Rommel was a jazz musician improvising a solo, Monty was a conductor demanding every note be played exactly as written. Monty's philosophy was based on two things: morale and material. When he took over the Eighth Army, his first move was to burn all plans for retreat. He told his troops, "We will fight here or we will die here." He restored their confidence. Secondly, Monty refused to fight Rommel's mobile game. He knew Rommel was better at it. Instead, Monty used the massive industrial might of Britain and America to construct set-piece battles. He wouldn't attack until he had overwhelming superiority in tanks, artillery, and aircraft. He called this tidiness. He wanted to turn the fluid desert war into a static, attritional meat grinder where numbers, not brilliance, would win. And this is why Rommel was the only true rival for Monty. Rommel was the only German commander audacious enough and fast enough to disrupt Monty's careful preparations before they were complete. Monty constantly had to guard against Rommel doing something crazy, something illogical that could wreck his tidy plans. The climax of this rivalry came in late 1942 at the Second Battle of El Alamein. This was the moment the two philosophies collided head-on. Rommel was at the end of his tether. His supply lines were decimated by the Royal Navy and Air Force. He was sick, and his army was dug in behind massive minefields, what he called the Devil's Gardens. Montgomery launched his masterpiece. It wasn't a clever flanking maneuver. It was a brute force World War I-style attritional battle. A massive artillery barrage followed by infantry and tanks chewing their way through the German defenses. Rommel, even while sick and absent for the start of the battle, rushed back and tried to react with his usual brilliance. He shifted his limited armor to plug the gaps, executing local counterattacks that would have broken a lesser commander than Monty. But Monty held his nerve. He forced Rommel into a boxing match where the British had endless stamina and the Germans were already gassed. He slowly pulverized the Axis forces with overwhelming firepower. Yet even in defeat, Rommel showed why he was Monty's unique rival. Against Hitler's strict orders to stand and die, Rommel ordered a retreat. What followed was a masterclass in rearguard action. For hundreds of miles across Libya, Rommel managed to keep his battered army just one step ahead of Montgomery's cautious pursuit. Any other commander would have been encircled and annihilated. Rommel lived to fight another day. Montgomery won the war in North Africa. His methodical approach, backed by overwhelming Allied resources, was the correct strategy to defeat the Axis in that theater. He was the hammer that finally broke the Afrika Korps. But Rommel won the legend. Why was Rommel the only one who could rival Montgomery? Because they needed each other to define their own greatness. Monty needed a foe as terrifying as the Desert Fox to prove that his deliberate, cautious system worked. Defeating an average German general wouldn't have made Monty an icon. And Rommel needs Monty in the history books to show the limits of pure tactical genius when faced with overwhelming material superiority and a commander who refuses to panic. It was the rivalry of the improviser versus the organizer, the rapier versus the sledgehammer, and in the unforgiving expanse of the North African desert, they created the most compelling duel of the Second World War. So, which leadership style do you prefer? The daring, lead-from-the-front intuition of Rommel, or the calculated, preparation-heavy approach of Montgomery? Let me know down in the comments below.